Oh, am I? No, you are recording. Okay. I moved. So I'm really a linguist by training, which shapes my thinking quite a bit. So formal languages and a lot of being trained to see structure. That's sort of my training. I moved into a co-housing community that uses sociocracy here in Amherst. So 70 people, self-governed. We do everything ourselves. And that's how I got exposed to sociocracy, and then fairly quickly became a sociocracy trainer. And I'm actually part of a little group here in Amherst because David Bollier, who's big in the commons world, he lives in Amherst. So we connected with him a while ago, and now we're part of a group with him that is trying to see locally here what we can pull together in terms of people who are interested in the commons in all kinds of areas like this, university people, library people, and so on. It's all cool stuff. So I'm excited about that. And I'm complete. And let's see, who did I say? Lauren and Tahera. We're gonna just put you at the end if you want to speak then. So Lauren.
Okay. I'm interested in sort of a commons hustle and trying to figure out how to reframe the commons as something that we can actually get some investment capital. So kind of like finding the language to actually kind of like sell the commons and make it something that's in the mainstream. So I feel like we have like kind of the academic background. We have places where commons are happening. The concept is kind of familiar with people, but I want to like make more commons abundance. So it's like we can actually do some amazing things with common pool resources.
Yeah, I think you're complete. All right, Ben, Amanda, after.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm unmuted now.
No, sorry. This is my habit of always saying two things. So it's Ben and then you. I just warned you that. Sorry.
You're coming up next, so you can get ready.
That's what I'm saying.
Good.
If you want to go first, that's fine, Amanda.
So I'd say I've been with the Commons since 2013. From the beginning of WeShare, I have been following up with Peer-to-Peer Foundation a lot. I've been active in the field, which is something different than just being a scholar talking about the commons. I've been visiting and involved into projects locally, internationally. My fascination with governance is at this moment we have many different group structures and everybody's finding out a new governance structure. There's a tight link to whole systems, I would say, and commons, and they're interrelated, cross-pollinating, and using different languages at the same time. And I actually look for a meta-language on governance structures, and just to be able to talk to different groupings and talk about our value systems and still make something useful out of that. And I'm following closely on Lauren with her mission because I think it's interesting that commons have become somewhat out of the mainstream and at the same time are in the mainstream, which is it could be also a danger, but it can also be a challenge. So let's see. So that will be it.
All right, well, I'm Ben Roberts. I think I know all of you at least a little bit. We've had a chance to connect here and there, and some of you I know pretty well. I see regenerating and revitalizing the commons as one of the key strands in the movement of movements for whole systems transformation. That this collaboratory dialogue is in service to, and our theory that the community scale, the local scale, is where the deepest transformations, are possible and need to happen. I think is aligned with that. And I know Ted, and I'm fascinated by governance, and agree that cracking the governance challenge in all these different emergent contexts that are not really the same as traditional organizational ones is a huge systemic leverage point to going to turn off the chime. Sorry about that. Yes. People dropping in and out here. Anyway, I'm in. Good to be here. Great to see all these folks. Hi, Naji. Hi.
All right.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go in the order of how people came. So Tahera, is that how you say your name? Can you unmute? And yes, and then
yes, Tahera is great. Hi all. So I am least familiar with the commons and governance in this particular context, but I work in the space of promoting and advancing regenerative food systems, and I think regenerative in its nature, to me, it's very local, place-based. And so both the idea, when I think of commons, I think of natural systems and commons, and how we are having failed models of governing those commons. And so just two words in itself were very much relevant to both the work that I do and what I'm keenly interested in. So just listening in to see what evolves here. Thank you.
Naji, you are somewhere where it's either dark already or not light out yet. Wherever that might be.
He's in London, I think. Normally one would find Naji in London.
Yeah, it could be dark in London now. Do you want to speak? Unmute, yes.
Hello. Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Let me see. I hope. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Hi. So I'm here because I've been seeing these TRC meetings come and me missing them. And I thought I would join this one. I did like the title of it. It made me think to like, you know how it's the duty of like the public sphere and the government to create the physical infrastructure for development, right? So when it comes to the new economy that's emerging, the one I like to think of as a new moral economy, much of the collaboration happens online, right? And so what about creating the commons in terms of a virtual infrastructure for collaboration, one that reduces the transaction cost of getting people and organizations with their resources around good ideas and making them happen in pursuit of shared goals and purposes. So that's what drew me to this particular meeting. So thanks so much. It's nice to be here.
So now, of course, I'm in this funny position of having called this meeting and not really having a plan for it, because why would I make a plan with so many good people? So here's what I would like to do. At least I have a plan of how to make a plan. And that is, let's do a quick round where you can sort of, if you have one, like this is the topic, you need to narrow it down because commons and governance is way too big. Narrow it down, and this is how I would like to spend the next 45 minutes. And then we'll see if one of them gets consent. So let's do just the same order again, I say, and you propose a topic. Who started? Paul. Right, Paul started.
Hi, everyone. Those who joined the beginning and as we were introducing ourselves, I'm Paul. I'm just in Ontario here. I'm near Lake Ontario. Well, I think through reading, I read Ted's article yesterday about sociocracy and Austrian principles, and I've read the Austrian principles before. I've been thinking about this idea of shared resources and shared decision-making. And I guess I'm wondering about, and I opened up earlier when I introduced myself around the tension between colonization and commons. So I guess I'm interested in conversations that both in the one way hold the ethic of shared futures and shared resources, but in a context of not only of inequity, but in the context of legitimacy and authority. And so for the Great Lakes context, while there might be 40 million people living in the Great Lakes, do all 40 million people have an equal right to make decisions for that bioregion? Or do the indigenous nations and peoples have a greater sense, greater power and authority and legitimacy to make those decisions as well. And so I'm curious on the equity of inequity in some ways. And lastly, I'm also related to that because of the governance structures, the embedded ethics in that. And so if indigenous nations and peoples are having a greater emphasis on their position within governance, their related relationships to the water and the water ethics. And so in some ways, moving from a common pool resource, to use that language, into a common source of life, and looking at ways in which the sacred enter into resource rhetoric. And so I'm curious on sort of these lines of tension, of opportunity in the context that I work in here in the Great Lakes. Or any context, really, but that's the theme.
Wow. You know, I shouldn't be doing this, but I talk about sociocracy all day. I don't want to talk about it here. So, you know, that was the first thing you mentioned. It's like, I'm very inspired by who has authority, legitimacy for shared resources, like to even make those decisions. I think that's a big question I'm interested in. And I'll just stop there and pass on to Lauren.
Okay, so to address Naji's point about a virtual commons, so, you know, I've thought about it for a while, like, how do we form the governance? And I think that it's much better if you can do it through community instead of, you know, just, you know, a few people deciding on some rules. So, you know, I've been thinking, how do we form it together? And so what I came up with was that perhaps we could form into groups or crews based on just friends in local locations and actually like talk about it. First, listing the subjects that we have to go through. First is a brainstorming session of all the things that we kind of need to decide and go through, like how do you resolve disputes and so on and so forth. So I guess the first thing would be to just get together with certain people who are pretty, like, who's been doing this in practice and just seeing what we actually need to decide on. I think we could do this by groups and have kind of global hackathons to figure some of this out and get people's feedback. And then maybe develop it from there by basically in a way where it's like a pattern sharing way. So we start identifying patterns of what people are doing that's successful and figure out a way to share knowledge among the different groups so that people are actually like in a space where they're supported and can actually be successful and find ways to make more money and connect with their local community and actually do well in the structure. So that's just where I'm at.
Okay, well, I'm trying to put a headline sort of to the topic that you're suggesting, and I'm struggling to do so.
So my concern is basically practically, how do you form the governance?
Okay, got it. How to form sort of the, okay.
This is one thing to talk about it, but I forgot. Another thing, we have to find examples of people who are practicing it to get to see what they're doing and kind of like put those all together, because they all have like I've just been talking to Tahera.
Hold on, sorry, can I interrupt you? Because yeah. I would like to make sure that we hear because we're still just talking about what we're going to talk about. So I would like to go to the topic.
Okay.
Ben.
Yeah, I'd like to see what we can do to support the work that people are doing. You know, on this, there are people on this call who are doing commons building work right now, whether it's literally on the ground or in a virtual space, but there's a commons that they're creating. And I'd like to hear more about what they're doing, where their edges and challenges are, and how we might support their commons building work. not sort of abstract discussions about commons and governance, but what's happening now and how can we
Okay. Amanda?
Yes. I think it's all very interesting. It triggers a lot, especially Lauren. What can I say? I feel we have many different views on what commoning is. And with Silke Hilfrich, I would say there is no commons without commoning. And many of the commoning building work is sort of under adverse conditions. I don't see, or I'm not sure whether mainstreaming it would be a solution. I worked a lot with not mainstreaming projects, I would say. For me, my concern is that we have such a diversity of understanding of different kinds of commoning and governance that we lose out on ethically, being accountable towards one another. And I see actually the need for kind of a metastructure to talk about that. And I like that the commons are being challenged in some way because I feel a lot of the work that Lauren is referring to has been done, is being done, and yet it is new questioning. So, and I feel that's good because we're not there yet at all. So, very open to talk all of these topics, I would say.
You still haven't told me how you say your name. I would love to learn how you say your name.
My name?
Yeah.
So the Arabic pronunciation, which is an Arabic name, it's Tahera.
Okay, Tahera. Go ahead.
So yeah, I am just really keen to understand what commons refers to in the context of this strategy circle, this group, and just understand, how both of those words are threaded together, and just listening and observing, given Amanda and Ben both spoken to this already existing, having its legs, and so I just want to get an understanding of that and see if there's overlap, contribution, cross-pollination, all that good stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead. Naji? Can you hear us? Yeah.
Wonderful. Hi, can you hear me? So forgive me for being on the go, but I really wanted to join this call. And to my surprise, my pleasant surprise, I see that Amanda's there. Hi, Amanda, how's it going? You remember me, Naji, right? And hi, Ben. And thanks, by the way, for organizing this. So, it's interesting, but I think Amanda's point about a metastructure is something I'm interested in, but I happen to think that actually it has to be commercial rather than non-commercial. And I'm interested in sharing why I think that.
It depends on who's winning, Naji. It's interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the question was, what would you like to discuss? I am interested in discussing the commons as a metastructure for networks, collaboration towards shared goals, shared purposes, and whether that is going to take the shape of something commercial or non-commercial. So that's my kind of that's what I'd like to. That's what I've been inspired from hearing you guys speak, which I think might be really interesting to talk about.
All right, I hear about enough material for about 12 sessions to scratch the surface. To begin to scratch the surface. I would love to do the following. I guess there's a few questions like what are the commons anyway, and how do you start all that. We would actually get through a case study. So if we would just do a kind of clinic, and somebody willing to share what they're working on, that would give us a lot to work on, and then we could bounce off from there now that we have an understanding of what other people are interested in. Would that as a general approach work for people? Yes, I hear some people. The people who are well trained here give me their sign of consent.
Sure.
Paul, you're not saying anything, and you're not. I cannot read your response. I can't read your face. Now you have to use words.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand the proposal. I guess I'm just not sure how it's going to go. So I feel like there's a lot of difference on the call, and so I am curious on where the circles overlap. But I'm willing to follow somebody else's lead, but I don't have a clear sense of
I have a suggestion. Maybe what we can do is kind of define what we mean by the commons, and in so doing, we can maybe share a little bit about how that may be part of what we're doing.
So that would be basically doing another round of everybody sort of saying their definition and how that reflects in what they do.
We could also, within the case study context, we could look at that example and how the commons is being defined there as a starting point.
That's kind of what I meant, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's what I
doesn't like that, though. There is sort of a tension between the.
Who's got something in mind that they feel kind of is quite cool? What other ideas are there? Because that's.
Can I interrupt? Maybe
Amanda.
I feel we do have a lot of different opinions on commoning in this group, at least. I feel even some remarks are specifically not commons. So for me, it would be interesting to see. It's already interesting how it's forming, but we could call that definition. And then I think there's still a lot to say about that, because apparently it has attraction on many people, and there's many different strategies. So I would feel for a round, actually, if it's not too much time.
And also, this raises an interesting question about whether commons and private or closed initiatives are, whether they're mutually exclusive or not, because
Yes.
I would say that they are complementary and both are absolutely necessary. The commercial and the non-commercial, the commons and the non-commons, they're part of this. They will have to be part of the synergy.
All right. I think we're in the middle of a discussion. So how about, okay, let's speak to that. Let's speak to that question, the definition of the commons, and if you can do it on the concrete example of your own, whatever you do, that's great. Maybe we can jump on one of the projects if we ever have time. I doubt it. And Amanda, I would ask you to start and pick the next person, if that's okay.
Yes, it's good. I would just say, for short, for me, commons is non-extractive means of living together and being good with it. So that means non-extractive. It could still include some kind of an economy, but private markets and mainstreaming according to the extractive ways do not belong to commons for me. And I speak on a long track record of work with the Peer-to-Peer Foundation on that one. Then I would like to broaden, and I would say commons for me, it's common responsibility and not only resources. So for me, it's also a non-material matter, which would be interesting to see the boundaries and the mergers with the whole systems. And there is a couple of policy plans to even broaden that on countrywide scale. So that's my knowledge until here. Projects I'm in, I have been in. I would say, you know me from Naji, from Rotterdam, from the interesting project which tried to create an inner economy which was different from the outer economy, and yeah, even try to get out of the monetary system. I think that's a little bit radical, but I have been in such matters too. So I'm studying everything.
Pick the next person. Amanda, you pick the next person. We just make sure that everybody is covered.
Paul.
Come on, yeah. Well, I generally go by some of David Bollier's work on these definitions. You know, the root meaning of the word commons in English being this combination of gift and duty or responsibility. That's all the things that we inherit, share, and pass on. I work for Great Lakes Commons, an organization. I would obviously there's an elemental element to that kind of commons, fresh water being it, but also commons in the sort of social, cultural, economic as well. So the money system, the governance rules that we all inherit as well. And so that's the. But I think one of the edges, to use Ben's language, is this idea of naturalization. You know, I think some of the differences that have been identified here is who's able to control who's commons, right? And so how does commons both include people, but also who is it excluding, and how is it trying to naturalize forms of power, be they corporate or colonial or any form? And so I think commons as a framework, or as as a vocabulary, just like anything else, like democracy can be used and abused. And so I am curious on this bending, shifting, appropriative naturalization of the word commons, because I think unless we have a clear idea of like, well, what are we doing the common for? What are we doing the governance for, and for whom and on whose behalf? Then I think it can still be a top-down, forced upon, sort of, what's that, bombing people into democracy sort of thing. And so that's extreme, of course, but I am curious on who's commons and who gets to decide. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what is that system trying to accomplish? Is it trying to, again, be completely inclusive no matter what? Or does it have a long-term perpetual care principle? Or is it equally sort of trying to be responsible to the past while also looking to the future? So those are some of my thoughts. I picked the next person. Okay, I'll go with, I guess it was Tahera.
Thank you. So for me, I don't do any particular commons related work and how it gets defined as commons related work as I'm trying to understand it. But when I think of commons, I really think of some of those, I think of what really should be common to all of us, which is like air, water, soil, and my fears around, well, when you have, I don't know if people are aware, right, but Trump is in the process of redefining what water systems are under the federal governance and what shouldn't be, right? And you have people like Bolsonaro in Brazil. And when does the Amazon become, as a large commons, a shared resource for intervention, because some of the people who should rightfully be the folks looking after those commons are not empowered at this point? So it's about what can we have in transition as we get to governance structures which are more place-based, but may need a level of intervention, but where are the right lines? How do we intervene in a way that is empowering and not weakening the right indigenous? To me, I do feel like indigenous folks really know how to take care of the commons. I'm Indian. In India, we have great models of governance that have now become shitty but really, yeah, well, what is the transition going to look like? Because I feel like that's really where we're at. And understanding in the work that I do with regenerative agriculture, you have the models of like Flint, where somebody could buy the land and then now Nestle can take so much water out because of the way the current laws are. And how can that Flint community then change or overthrow that sort of stuff? So what is the right level of intervention when you think of things like Amazon, etc., and indigenous communities being really oppressed at this point? And where, how does this messy transition, what are some of the things we can put in play in these transitions? And especially when we look at things like the regenerative ag, the food fiber movements for making them more localized, how can they support this? Because it relies heavily on this, right? To make sure that we have this commons in place, the governance around it in place. So, and I pick Naji.
Hi, thank you very much. So, it sounds like I understand, I guess, two types of commons. One is like the kind of commons like lakes and the air and the forests and these kind of commons, right? And then the other kind of commons is like just non kind of like public space in general, and infrastructure, and Google is a commons for non-business users anyway, right? um, yeah, and it's the latter that I'm kind of more I work in more than anything else. And I guess I'm trying to imagine in the digital space how we can create a commons that enables people to achieve their goals and their aspirations, and to do that in a context that will give rise in the aggregate. That means when everyone is doing it, it'll give rise to a moral economy. And a moral economy is one where the goals and aspirations of the individuals are aligned with those of the organizations involved and society at large. And once you get this alignment, you have this kind of like it's a spiritual journey that we become on, because we're all aligned towards a shared societal goal, and it goes all the way down to the individual, um, right? And so to enable us to do that within the world that we live in today, within the capitalist system we live in today, I think it's possible if we create um, a commons that makes it accessible for everyone to join in collaboration and join in sharing, join in networking, learning, sharing ideas, networking, and then getting into working groups, and eventually, and this is where I think it is important that at the end it has to be, you know, what is it you're going to do in terms of like the project or the initiative. And that's where, you know, reality hits, because there's only two ways in this world of getting a project or an initiative in practice, right? Because one thing that all projects and initiatives in the world need are resources, and quite often money as well, right? So there's two ways that we can do that. One is by offering, like, having someone pay for our product or service, and the other one is to have the project and to have someone offer money for free, which is philanthropic money. And they are the only two avenues for actually getting a project done. And the philanthropic avenue could include people voluntarily putting their time. It's still you know, a philanthropic avenue. So my point is that my interest, what I'm working on now, is developing this kind of platform within one single branded organization. So it becomes like an open organization with a specific purpose, which in our case is offering consultancy or advice or projects or initiatives in the field of urban and regional development and organizational transformation, right? And so what are the kind of internal commons that we can create that anyone can access, anyone can join? For me, that's what I consider as the commons, as the kind of commons I'm interested in, that I work in, right? And then it starts to open up the question of the governance. It opens up the question of decision making, of shared resources, culture, and our shared brand. And then branding becomes an important part of like aggregating individuals and groups into a brand who have a shared purpose. And that brand is very useful in this world, because it's kind of nice to be able to talk to someone and know that they represent, right, that they're part of an organization. So the Semtera movement is branded as the Semtera movement, and we know it because it has a brand, same as Apple and everyone else. So branding, I think, is an important part of with it, you know, an important part of, well, creating a these kind of organizations of the future that have a commons in which people can achieve their goals and potentials within the shared purpose of that particular brand.
Pick a person if you complete. Are you done? I think so. Since he's not picking a person, I'll pick Lauren. Is that okay? I can't hear you right now. You're muted again.
Me?
No, hold on. Naji was saying something.
Yeah,
okay.
Lauren is great. Go ahead.
Okay.
I already talked.
You haven't talked in this round. Oh, whatever. Okay.
Did I just get picked?
Yes, you did just got picked.
Okay, let me just clean up the notes I was taking. If somebody else wants to help take notes, that would be fine. Cleaning up my typos, even. I'm a terrible typist. What can I contribute here? Well, one pattern that's showing up in some of my other work and I'm sensing in this conversation is maybe because the way I look at it is, if we're in a transitional phase now, what are things that we can do in the existing context, which is so far from the world we want, so far from a world where commons are recognized as sacred and are being actively regenerated and put in the highest place in the hierarchy of how we organize human activity, as opposed to being this what we have now, where it's a pool to be extracted from and used for profit primarily. And so if we're in a transition and we have, the capitalist system is what we have to deal with right now, and the governance systems we have and the organizational structures we have are what we have to deal with right now, there's a case to be made for working within those, even as we know, or at least I believe, that at some point those structures can't get us where we ultimately need to go. But can we stop the harm? Joanna Macy talks about stopping the harm, holding actions while we build the new, and shifting consciousness as the three domains of systemic transformation work. So we need to buy time, if you will. And so I think that we can look at the commons in the context of the existing system in a more narrow way, but there's also a much deeper and more fundamental sense of it that I think just can't, that I see, in some sense, private ownership being inimical, in opposition to, or a profit-driven system being in opposition to, at least with the way that money is currently structured and organized. So that's a big pattern that I'm wrestling with in terms of where I put my own energies and work. And I guess the other thing I could say, as a case study or clinic, there's the Digital Life Collective, which formed as a cooperative to essentially create new technological platforms or support those who are doing it as a global commons to replace things like Facebook and Google, which I agree with Naji. Those are a form. They're what we have instead of a commons. They're privately owned things that should be a public commons. Our computer operating systems, our social networks, our tools for virtual collaboration. From my perspective, those should be not for profit and advertising driven, but based on a shared resource for all, like a public utility. Perhaps if we're going to transition, can we at least start regulating those entities as public utilities? But that's just a half measure. So that's the landscape I'm seeing in this conversation now. I'm complete.
I'm the person who hasn't spoken in this round, so I'll speak and then we can just start over. This gets complex so very easily, and that is that I guess I always struggle with the sort of, where do I situate myself, because I talk about governance while creating resources about governance that I consider a commons itself. So commons governance is a commons. I mean, you know, that so however, and then what I struggle with, and that touches on the points that all of you have mentioned, is even in a product like governance, there is branding and copywriting, and you know, so that's just wild to me. How can you own a social technology is wild to me. How can you think you can own a social technology? So everything we put out is always Creative Commons, because it doesn't make any sense. For example, around, you know, is so sort of the poster case thing of sociocratic governance, and yet of course it's been used in many cultures. So owning something like that would be ridiculous to do. It's just something that we all, that's just heritage. However, there are people, and that touches the money aspect of it. There are people who are stewards for that kind of stuff. I consider myself steward for governance, using what we have learned from others, right, and helping other people access it. And that is often unpaid work. So that all comes together. However, and that then we go back to the who decides question, because some people pay more attention to some things, right? So just living in a place, does that mean you have a say? So just being human being, does that mean, you know, like, anyway, so that's something I struggle with, especially because I guess the point where I'm most burnt is too many people wanting a say, because to me that's a biggest inhibitor for anything. So the whole let's all decide together kind of stuff, I typically walk away once that's happened. And it's like, okay, never mind. If everybody decides, I'm out of here, because that doesn't go anywhere ever. So so I guess, you know, I'm sort of touching on all the different points that you said without going anywhere special with it. I'm just bouncing off myself. So let's just I guess I'm just going to start with the first person again, whoever that was. To be honest, I don't remember. Oh no, it started with a man. No, you want to speak? You can. Okay.
Yes, I do speak.
Okay, go ahead then, and then pick the next person.
What I think, because folks of like it's so broad in terms of all the different types of commons, at whichever point it organically evolves. So it would be great to know more, less abstractly and more concretely, which specific commons we're referring to, whether it is this, and they're with the understanding that they're all interrelated, but whether it's going to be money as a commons, or social digital technologies as a commons, or natural resources as a commons, whichever one, I personally feel that it would be useful, at least to me, to know which one we're referring to when we're talking about once we get there. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and yes, I guess that is the struggle to get even there. I mean, you present it as a starting point. I think it's at the same time an end point and a starting point. So, anyway, but Amanda looks like she wants to speak. And are you, Tahera? Are you
complete? Yes.
Yes. And you okay with? Okay, then I'm just gonna hand it off to Amanda, and then I want to be hands off again, so Amanda decides to speak.
Okay. To refer to Tahera, because I was making, faces like this. I always feel like some of the more abstract topics, they remain absent in many commons discussions, because it's so much onto the resources only, even by scholars. I often miss the non-material dimension, and I wanted to drop another aspect in, because I feel we are all touching on that maybe, and that would be, I feel many innovators or commoners actually are supposed to live with a kind of a split personality. Are you home, Naji?
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you.
So split personality in that sense that we continuously have to defend why we want something which is so normal to be different. But for me, I start to get at a point where I feel like I'm just one person, and I happen to have insights by my experience, which are more in the commoning realm and other realms also. And I'm sorry, but I cannot just take out the experience and just try to become an extractive person again. I am not. So it doesn't matter where I go. And I feel like maybe it should help, well, I try to do that for myself, to reverse the whole issue, not into how do we get the whole world following us, but why do we not have the right to use our intelligence in the first place? And that would be an interesting, maybe, angle. Go ahead, Naji.
Okay, so, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the difference between extractive and non-extractive, okay? So I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm starting a business. I'm actually starting an organization, right? And so I've taken that introspective journey of thinking very hard about what do I want this organization to look like, to be different, and one of the to typical businesses. And actually one of the big differences for me is that I don't want it to be extractive. And I've designed it so that it's not extractive. And I've worked out how to do that, Amanda, right? And this is the difference, I think, between, and this is working within a capitalist system, of course, where at the end of the day, you know, the organization is generating value. The question between extractive and non-extractive, I think, comes to, if you look at the overall value that the organization is generating, is creating, is that value, that monetary value, let's talk about, to keep it simpler, is that monetary value that we're generating, is it shared fairly amongst everyone involved or not? And the typical organization, the way it's set up, is to extract as much of the value generated to the entrepreneur, the founders, the investors, and top management. And it's done in such a way as to squeeze everyone else at the bottom as much as possible, pay them as little as possible, and use supply-demand equilibrium of labor markets as an excuse to not give them a fair share of the value that we're generating. So for me, the way to get around that is to turn it into a platform model, but then to allow participation and allow people to share whether they think the model that we've created is fair or not, and to allow anyone to raise that as an issue anytime. But let's say everyone agrees the model is fair now, it's good enough for now, which in our case it is. People are happy with the setup that we've created. Then it stops becoming an extractive model, because we're enabling teams to get together, to use our shared brand to deliver a service or a product, well, a service to a client. And what we take is like we add a margin. It's like a thin 10% margin over and above what they choose to get paid. So they get into teams, they set up their own salaries, their own daily rates, and they're bidding on a project, and then the vast majority of the value generated stays within the network. 10% goes to Urban Emerge. That's before distributing it as profits, obviously, because there's a lot of things we want to do. And if there is a profit, and again, there is a way to generate profits. Once you've got your internal budget, you can negotiate a higher price with a client. Now there's a profit. And again, we've developed a very fair way of sharing that profit in a way that's fair, but incentivizes everyone key to winning that project. So the business development person, whoever goes out and gets the client or gets, you know, whoever puts together the proposal, because it takes time to put together a proposal. You're investing your time, and then you've got the team, and then you've got a small share for Urban Emerge, right? Now, the beauty about that is that once you need, by the way, to have resources in a network, in an organization, right? You got to have some people who have to invest their time and money into helping the entire network, right? Amanda, right? You can't just it's impossible to do that for free sustainably. It's got to be sustainable, right? So, but that's the difference between an extractive business model and a non-extractive business model. And that's why I'm so hopeful about platforms being an opportunity for a non-extractive business model.
I'm happy for you. I agree with many of the things. Yet, still, we are submerged in a extractive market where, you know, some money still funnels, you know, the clients we work for. Are they extractive? Do we have an ethical bond there? do we work on the same impact? Do we measure the impact? Or are we still delivering commercial services? We do share the value. So there's many aspects, but I agree we should start and we should always do. But I have worked on some, extreme projects. So I try to stretch my mind a bit sometimes. So I love the take that you.
I'm into wide systemic change. So I want the strategies that we're doing to be scalable, and I want the new types of organizations we're creating to outcompete the old model people. And yes, we will be selling services to very extractive organizations, and that's absolutely fine, because we have to grow and we have to prove that it's a feasible alternative to work the way that we do. I have, we're here today. We're not in that future, but to get there, we got to start somewhere. Can I say something? Yeah.
As a 44 years old woman, I feel a bit tired of the word outcompete. I feel I should have the possibility as a transformational manager, for example, to say, stop outcompeting each other. I'm tired. It's interesting that I feel it's a normal human trait, characteristic to also have a competition, but it's so prevalent. So speaking of all these kind of nuances in life, where we are searching in whole systems, in commoning to do it differently, and I think I'm with Lauren on this one. So we might go around. But I think there's so many aspects we want to work on, and I love your initiative. But
I would love just to throw one last thing before I hear Lauren, which is to clarify what I mean by outcompete.
Yeah.
If you create a non-extractive business model, like a business model where decision-making is done differently, and where the value we generate is shared in a way that's fair and different, I'm talking about these kind of organizations outcompeting the autocratic organizations where decisions are made to benefit people at the top. It's not widely, people don't have access to decision making at all, pretty much. And the value is extracted towards the top. I'm talking about our kind of organizations of outcompeting the more extractive kind of organizations, where people will start thinking, you know what, I'd like to work there because I can actually make more money. And this is how we can outcompete them, by most people making more money. Now, the guys at the top will not make more money. Mark Zuckerberg would not make more money by being at the top of an organization, but he would be super rich, but everyone else would be a little bit better off. And so we outcompete them like that because it's more meaningful work. It's a better, more attractive culture, and the value we generate is shared more fairly, and people have voice.
All right, on process. If what we're doing continued, we would go into debate style, which would basically be competing over airtime. And I don't want to do that. A little bit is fine. Yet we're going back to a round. And this was basically going to be a closing statement, I'm guessing. I don't know how, you're welcome to stay longer, but I know I need to eat lunch before my next thing. So I might actually leave you guys, stay in the Zoom room and cook. But let's see. How about I just shuffle you without thinking too much and write an order in the chat, and then then we can see where we are. Let's see. Oh, so I'm putting Lauren Ben. There's autocorrect going on here. Sorry, that makes it hard. And it's gonna be Lauren first, so you can get ready, or you can actually get started. Where are you right now? What's on your mind, Lauren? You hear me? You're muted.
Yes, I do.
What do you want to say? Go ahead. Yes, it's your turn.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to see if we can make something actionable. Like, is there something we can produce or something like concrete that we can make out of this call? And I would just like to put forth my personal opinion. This is about movement strategy. I'm kind of feeling the meta idea in terms of who is doing the commenting, what kind of commons there can be, and what governance structures have already been created, just a list of things we know that have been done. Could we make a list?
Ben.
Isn't that what Peer-to-Peer Foundation did? There's a whole wiki from that.
Oh.
And, I mean, there's a big wiki. There's a lot of, maybe we should, maybe I can tour you around. I would love to tour you around.
Sounds good.
Can I be included in the tour, please? Thank you.
Ben.
No, barely scratched the surface in an hour. I was just reading one of my and Paul's favorite books, which our puppy, or my son's puppy, I know, has been chewing. And she talks about you need at least 90 minutes, you know, to get anywhere in a generative, emergent kind of conversation. So I'd love to see, you know, if this could just be part one, because I sense a lot of energy here and a lot of, you know, sort of different tracks going on simultaneously that we're trying to hold. And if we just come out of this with some resources, you know, that we can name, there is, here's one small concrete action step. Here's meta in terms of just serving this dialogue, is an invitation for each of you to just share some nuggets, jewels that emerged out of this conversation for you. Maybe they're just questions, as well as creating an annotated list of resources. So it looks like we've got some things already added in the resources by Paul. There's a form to do both of these that's in the Google Doc, and that I can also share with everybody in the chat, email, whatever. There's a form for resources, there's a form for your little personal harvest from these conversations. And all of that's part of the output of the overall dialogue. So contributions to that would be very much appreciated, to just make this time, to have what happened here, even in this hour, as sort of crazy and diverse and messy as it is, you know, flow out in who knows what ways.
Paul.
Is our closing, I guess? Yeah, I mean, I will follow up with these feedback documents. You know, I was just, the thought I had when Ted was speaking about 15 minutes ago, like that idea of inclusion and like, if everybody gets to decide, then, you know, you're out kind of thing. And so I'm thinking about, you know, these pathways of what are the commitments one needs to make or show to gain access to the decision-making process. And I work in a very land-based context, and you know, unless you're going to be around or investing in this place long-term, or unless your ancestors invested in this place a long-term, it's not so equal. And so I'm just curious on those pathways around who gets access to decision-making, and also that interplay of decision-making and authority. So that's it.
So in my closing, one, I want to thank you all for entertaining me, since I'm such a baby to this discussion. And also, I mean, there's a healthy amount of debate, and just the extent of what commons means, and for everybody what it is relating to, especially to the work that they're doing, is very rich, and that it's all in one space is great too. And I would love to, that case study that we spoke of, it'd be great to know that if everybody's reading it and sort of committing to coming back in the next discussion with specific, you know, if that's the flow we're going to take, if we're going to use that as one of the concrete things. I love what Lauren said in terms of also the tangibles, just to understand what it is that as a group we want coming out of it, based on the fact that the whole premise of these circles are, how do we support the people who are doing all of this work? And so given everybody is doing this work, I would love to hear specifically where some of the challenges are in moving it forward, and then seeing what's available amongst ourselves and outside to support some of those challenges.
I personally think that we saw all the challenges presented here in this discussion. It's like, it's always on large scale, it's always the same as in small scale, and it's frustrating. So I guess to me, in terms of movement building, the biggest inhibitor is again what I saw here, which I'm actually having a meta discussion about on Friday as one of these talks, and that is how can we, or is there a way of speeding up the whole understanding each other issue? Because that is an inhibitor for anything we do, because each of us coming with so different ideas and so different experiences, so different understandings of, I sort of took charge here of process, but that is typically also who decides, how do we decide, what are we doing, why are we doing this? Like, everybody struggles with that. Plus, commons is also relatively abstract, so there's all the different layers of how specific and what area. Anyway, so I guess I'm advertising my session on Friday. Not that I have anything brilliant to say about it. It's just something that's very much on my mind and concerned about the how do we understand each other issue. Yeah, I guess as a next step, if somebody is inspired, have either do it yourself or ask Ben to coach you through, okay, scheduling another session, and now that we sort of have a lay of the land, it would be good to go propose something very specific. I guess I'm complete. Amanda.
Hi there. I hope it was not too frustrating, actually.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a process person, so I get frustrated by process. That's true. But that's okay. I'm also okay being frustrated. That's not a problem. Go ahead.
I recognize it. I mean, I have been in many Commons conversations, even on the European Commons Assembly, preparing a governance structure of the Commons to move the movement forward. And then in the end, it was so hard because everything is a debate, everything is new, everything has to be redefined. And we know this, and we need much more time to do it. So, and then the group gets scrambled and get a new group in, and then it's open again, and then there's no continuation. So I would say, I would plead for some continuation with the people that really put their heart and soul in it. Heart and soul in it, for me, is also kind of a norm to work with. So it's more than just, I don't know. And then I think it's a very interesting development that we become mainstream now. And I see some difficulties to tackle also there, because most commons kind of projects that become mainstream, they become, in the end, we get a common city like Barcelona, which is basically a smart city together with smart citizens, but the tech companies still rule. I do not see a very clear sound from the Commons movement. Hey, that wasn't Commons for us. I do not see it. So I'm also worried on the Commons movement that it's becoming too mainstream, that it's not stubborn enough, that it's not discussing the real criticism, that it's not addressing it. And in the same time, yes, I agree with Naji. Everybody putting energy in should be able to have a life somehow. And the understanding thing, it's about also understanding that there's many understandings to bridge and to make it normal to bridge that and to make a negotiation. And we still live in the command and control society where people are being fitted into jobs and just doing as boss says. Well, people like me have so much governance experience, it could be a conversation like that before I enter everywhere. So it's like, I feel we should open that up, and it should be like a normal new talent of young, new leaders with experience in these realms to lead also, kind of these kind of topics, and to make that a normal, because we all seem to want to have impact. We all seem to want to be inclusive, even if it's a lie, but we say we want to be inclusive and sustainable. Then let's measure. and let the people lead who know how to lead that. And with that, I think it's nice also bridge for Naji doing a good job there. So. Should I pick somebody new now, or does somebody else?
Naji, you're muted, Naji, but it's your turn.
Thank you for reminding me that I'm muted, and for passing the buck over to me. So for me, you know, the frustration or the kind of like the difficulty in finding a shared understanding is only natural in a group like this, because, well, we've never met before, most of us, or at least, you know, we come from different worlds and different perspectives, and so it's just about sharing our own perspectives, throwing them out there. It makes for really nice kind of like time out of time, right? Do something different, and if there's a couple of pieces of inspiration, you know, that we can take with us, it's kind of, I don't hope for more than that from a meeting like this, because we're not part of either a team or a working group or an organization. That there is no specific purpose here other than to make the world a better place. So yeah, so that's why for me I don't feel it as frustrating, because I don't expect more than what we're doing, first of all. Second, I think the way to create shared understanding is in an organization is just to have a vision and bring people who resonate with that vision to join you in your shared purpose, and that immediately makes it much easier to have that, to create that shared understanding, and then to start actually co-creating and experimenting and learning from what does work, what doesn't work. Stop doing what doesn't work as quickly as possible. Recognize that. Go with what works, right? And then once you have this organization that is sustainable, okay, and a sustainable organization means that the people working in that organization can pay their mortgage, feed their kids, eat well, go on holiday a couple of times a year, and live a normal civilized life that we expect for everyone in this world post the year 2010, right? So once you've got that, then it becomes the people now start playing within the organization. So they become the organization, and that's quite cool, because then you can become an entrepreneur within your own organization. You leverage the brand to follow your dreams. And then what happens is your roles become more fluid in that organization. So you can actually start doing the kind of things that you discover you're good at, that you enjoy doing. And then you start reaching out to other organizations where like-minded people share with a certain purpose that you throw out there, a goal, which aligns to our higher purpose, right? Because all our goals should align with our higher purpose. This is how we can change the world, actually. It's just making sure that all our goals align with the higher purpose. And then to just take a look around and say, okay, so we're planning to do this. Who's this going to affect? Please come and tell us, and we'll work something out. I mean, it's not rocket science, really. It's actually quite easy if people who are in their jobs all over the world just have this freedom to think freely and to consider the higher purpose, you know. And then now you've got your organization and all these entrepreneurs and experts and experimenters and learners and dreamers in your organization reaching out to other organizations. Now you've got a couple of organizations getting together in a partnership, and then bringing a third one in. And that's, for me, that's how we'll achieve our shared higher purpose, you know.
So how about I given my total authority here, I'm formally closing the session. That doesn't mean you have to leave. You can just stay, but I'm just saying that, you know, I sort of consider this the intentional space is over from now on. It's just whatever it is, and I'm following the link that Amanda put in the chat here. That's what I'm doing right now.
Did we hear from everyone in the closing round?
I thought we did. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. What is this we thing? Oh, I think okay. I think now I remember.
I can stay on, but I'm going to be making myself lunch, so I'm going to stop my video and walk downstairs if people want to keep going a little bit. It's up to y'all.
How about Lauren? Are you cooking, Lauren?
No, sorry, I just got distracted by my daughter.
Okay, good. Let's do that. What time?
Somebody booked the overlapping session, unfortunately, but I think I planned it for, what time zone are you? It's 4:30 p.m. UTC, so whatever that is for you. I'm guessing it's